Chapter 22, Sweet, Sweet Game Theory. Game theory is useful. It's the analysis of how we are going to behave in reaction to others. It's not only how we build strategies against our opponents, but also how we preempt the actions of others in our day-to-day activities. Julius Caesar used game theory. He was well known for taking cities without losing a single man. He would hold a meeting with the business council of a city. He gave them two options. He would lower their taxes if they gave him keys to the city and handed over the current lord, or he would kill everyone. Business meetings don't take long on these sorts of decisions. Caesar made the situation predictable by giving his opponents a simple choice. The prisoner's dilemma is a game. Now, there are many great videos online that could explain the dilemma in detail, and I encourage you to watch one in particular. Search for Richard Dawkins' Nice Guys Finish First on YouTube. In short, here's the dilemma. You and an accomplice are robbing a bank. You get caught. You are in the interrogation room at the police station. The police make you an offer. Admit to robbing the bank and let them know other crimes your accomplice has committed, and they will let you go for helping them out with the case. If you talk, your accomplice will be sent to prison for a long time. However, they give your accomplice the same deal. If you both kept your mouth shut, you each would get a small amount of prison time because they still need to book you for the robbery. If you both confess and say that your partner committed other crimes, then each of your prison sentences will be greater than they would have been if you would have both kept your mouth shut. On an individual level, the worst thing that could happen to you is for you to keep your mouth shut and have your accomplice rat you out. You didn't cooperate with the police on top of them having a testimonial for your extra crimes. You would get the worst prison sentence possible. So, what are your best choices? Game theory says that you should defect, which is another way of saying that you should rat your accomplice out. The reason is that no matter what your accomplice ends up choosing, you will avoid the worst prison sentence while having the chance to walk away completely free. Even though it would be better for the group as a whole for both of you to keep your mouth shut and cooperate, defecting is not only the more tempting option, it is also the most rational option. Of course, humans aren't always rational. The accomplice may also be a best friend or a family member with whom you maintain a high degree of trust. The prisoner's dilemma is a made-up scenario. It is useful in showing us how certain situations can pit us against each other, even though cooperation is better for the group as a whole. Dawkins conducted an insightful experiment back in the 1980s. He asked other researchers to design a program that would play a game of prisoner's dilemma with other programs. There would be a competition between all of the other programs to see who could score the most points. You got 4 points if you defected when your opponent cooperates. You get 3 points if you and your opponent both cooperate. You get 2 points if both of you defect. You get 1 point if you cooperate while your counterpart defects. Every program would go up against every other program for 10 exchanges each. So if each program in a single match chose to cooperate 10 times in a row, then each program would score a total of 30 points each for that round. Of course, there is a greater reward for defecting when your opponent cooperates, so some programmers tried to be tricky and develop programs that would throw in a defect and a cooperate as strategically as they could. The competition was held and the result was surprising. Tit for Tat, one of the simplest programs, won the competition. All Tit for Tat did was open up with a cooperate move and simply mirror the last move that its opponent chose. So if Tit for Tat's opponent chose to defect every time, then Tit for Tat would lose out on the first exchange because it would cooperate, but would defect for the rest of the round. If Tit for Tat met up with another nice program, then they would cooperate for the majority of the round. This led to an interesting result. Tit for Tat could never beat any singular opponent in any round. At best, it could only tie with any other program, but the accumulative rounds with all the other programs made it so Tit for Tat won out in the end. What does Tit for Tat represent in the real world? If you behave like Tit for Tat, you treat everyone with kindness the first time you meet them. If they return the kindness, then you form a mutually beneficial relationship. However, if someone betrays you, then you cut them out of your life. You don't cooperate with them anymore. If they come back to apologize, you accept the apology and choose to work together again. A Tit for Tat person is quick to forgive and quick to punish. You don't let people take advantage of you, but you value equality enough so that no one will ever have more than you. And yet, at the end of the day, you will be the most prosperous among all of your peers. The philosophical implication of Tit for Tat should not be understated here. Be a nice guy, but have boundaries. Don't let people walk all over you. It gets better. Dawkins asked everyone to resubmit new programs to compete in a second tournament. The first tournament results were published, so everyone knew that Tit for Tat won. This means you can plan around what Tit for Tat will do and hopefully beat it in the long run of the tournament. There were even more programs submitted in the second tournament than the first. Guess who won? It was the simplest program that won again. What that means is that even when you try to be sneaky around tit-for-tat people, they maintain this sort of elegant simplicity and order that keeps them moving along in life in a stable and prosperous path. Imagine if there were only mean programs in the tournament, where they only defected every time. Tit-for-tat wouldn't win. In fact, it would come in last place. There does need to be enough nice people in our environment to make our cooperative, nice guy first mentality give benefits to us. What this means is that even if a nice guy knows he is going into a notoriously bad part of town, he may just defect out of practicality. He knows he is going to get the raw end of the deal anyway. Does this extreme scenario sound like an impossibility? It isn't. One real-world scenario that illustrates a complete breakdown of cooperation is the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is another scenario in game theory. Dawkins cites Port Meadow and Oxford as an example. When the meadow was first opened to the public, the government asked each commoner how many animals they would like the legal rights to graze on the meadow. Each commoner submitted an estimate that was in the ballpark of being the most they could possibly hope to graze. Every bid was accepted. So even if every commoner is grazing what they are entitled to, there were still problems with overcrowding. Dawkins points out how if only one farmer owned all of the land, then this problem wouldn't happen. The farmer would make a rational choice on how much to graze and when to graze. The farmer would use no more and no less than the meadow could support. However, multiple farmers were stuck with a problem. If other farmers chose to overgraze, then you were better off overgrazing too, because you would be worse off if you didn't take advantage of the grazing opportunities while they were still available. To make matters worse, even if everyone else stopped overgrazing, you wouldn't be hurting the meadow if you continued to overgraze all by yourself. It's a giant game of prisoner's dilemma. Everyone reasoned to overgraze, and the meadow ended up being ruined. Game theory is pretty clear about cooperation. Cooperation always leads to a better outcome for the group. I believe the entire world is stuck in an enormous game of prisoner's dilemma. We don't trust each other. Humans care a great deal about trust. Trust could be a matter of life and death for our ancestors. It could be a matter of life and death today. Angela Merkel is the current Chancellor of Germany. She grew up on the east side of the Berlin Wall during the Cold War. She saw what happens when we don't trust each other. She was a big supporter of the European Union and uniting Europe under the euro currency. Actually, Europeans in general are very much for the euro. James Rickard's book, The Death of Money, points out how despite the tenuous financial situations many European countries have found themselves in because of the euro, the bigger picture has always been for the sake of peace. Imagine going through World Wars I and II and having your country demolished generation after generation. You get tired of it after a while. Merkel is of that spirit of change. Despite all of its failings due to conflicting monetary and fiscal policies, the chances of a giant European land war have dropped considerably. It doesn't even appear to be a potential threat in today's political consciousness. Certain countries had to give up some things, but the benefit of cooperating can go unnoticed for those not familiar with the political history and culture of the region. Why don't we regularly cooperate? This question can have many layers. Initial conflicts between early tribes were most likely fought over a limited supply of resources. Perception of racial superiority can be problematic and foster resentment. At the end of the day, I believe it all boils down to one thing. You are not going to cooperate if you believe in the possibility that your needs are going to be compromised. The threat could be real or contrived. Essentially, it is all a fear of scarcity. But how real is scarcity?